The LinkedIn Podcast Network is sponsored by SAP. Harness the power of AI across your business and achieve results that are relevant, reliable, and responsible with SAP Business AI. Revolutionary technology, real-world results. That's SAP Business AI.
Have you been feeling the effects of stress, burnout, or anxiety at work? Listen to the Anxious Achiever podcast to rethink the relationship between your career and your mental health. Get The Anxious Achiever wherever you find your podcasts and walk away with practical advice you can implement today.
LinkedIn presents.
When we argue with each other over politics, we focus on issues or the recent outrages that we've heard about. But those are all just the smoke, not the fire. The truth is, we would sound pretty silly if we said truthfully that I believe my party is right and your party is wrong because I want to be a good member of the racial and other social groups that I feel closest to.
It's Thursday. I'm Michael Kovnat, and this is the Next Big Idea Daily. Big ideas from big thinkers in under 15 minutes. And today, that big thinker is Keith Payne, author of the new book, Good, Reasonable People, The Psychology Behind America's Dangerous Divide. I'm afraid this might be a timely one. Keith is a professor of psychology and neuroscience at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and his research has been recognized with awards from the Association for Psychological Science, the Society for Personality and Social Psychology, and the International Social Cognition Network. Our curator, Adam Grant, says that in his book, Keith illuminates one of the biggest problems of our time and lights the way towards some promising solutions.
Most people don't have a political ideology. They may call themselves liberal or conservative, but most people struggle to define what that means. Scholars define an ideology as a coherent, interconnected set of beliefs. But when they look at how people respond in surveys, their answers are all over the place. Someone who takes a conservative position on taxes, for example, might take a liberal position on government spending. On issue after issue, there's not much correlation between opinions on logically related topics. And people are incredibly inconsistent over time. They flip-flop on issues from one survey to the next. Political scientists suggest that only about 15% of Americans have a coherent ideology. They are usually journalists, academics, and news junkies. The other 85% might feel passionately about politics, but their passion is not about issues or policies. It's about social group identities. Everyone starts from the premise that they are good, reasonable people, and the groups they belong to are too, and they interpret every piece of information in ways that preserve that conviction. If you present a partisan with evidence that what they believe is bad or wrong, they have dozens of ways to avoid changing their minds. They can decide the source of the information is unreliable or biased. They can decide you are untrustworthy or that you've been brainwashed. They can move the goalposts, change the subject, engage in whataboutism, and so on. It's frustrating when other people do that, but it's hard to see that we all do it ourselves. The psychological bottom line is that I'm a good, reasonable person, and my groups are too. Everything else has to add up to that. Our political allegiances are mostly a matter of chance events that have nothing to do with us. Sure, we feel that we have reasoned our way to our views, but the reasoning we find convincing is almost entirely predictable, based on factors in place before you were born. Philosophers call it moral luck. Jack Yuffie and his identical twin brother Oscar were separated at birth in 1933. Jack was raised in a Jewish American family. Oscar was raised in a Christian family in Germany as the Nazis came to power and joined the Hitler Youth. Predictably, they adopted the values of the groups they were assigned to. Many years later, they found each other and worked on reuniting. But they were never fully able to overcome the vast differences in the ways they saw the world. In the U.S. today, we can predict with great accuracy which political party people identify with if we know just a few facts about the conditions in which they were born. About 90% of Black Americans support Democrats. Around 60% of white Americans support Republicans. But that percentage is much higher if they were born in a county that was economically dependent on slavery in 1860. And we can predict which counties depended on slavery by the way the prehistoric ocean in the Cretaceous period covered some parts of the southern U.S., but not others, in chalky soil that made it fertile ground for cotton. Like a great line of dominoes set in motion millions of years ago, the time, place, and racial groups we are born to set us on different paths, and we have to make sense of the world from where we stand. We don't vote because of what we believe because of how we vote. Many people believe that we are in the midst of a misinformation crisis, a new post-truth world. And it's true that misinformation and conspiracy theories are running rampant. But what we fail to realize is that people have always believed a lot of weird stuff. When researchers looked at survey responses going back to the 1970s, they found that the proportion of the population that believes in conspiracy theories has remained roughly constant since then. In 1981, 48% of Americans believed the assassination of Robert Kennedy was a conspiracy rather than the act of a lone gunman. In 2021, 43% believed that. In 2021, half of Americans believed that humans had made contact with aliens, but the government was covering it up. Almost exactly the same proportion as in 1996. In the 1980s, popular conspiracy theories involved the Reagan administration. In the 90s, there were popular conspiracy theories about O.J. Simpson. Those have fallen out of fashion today, replaced by QAnon and false stories about immigrants eating people's pets. Tomorrow, it will be something different. But there is a simple recipe to make people believe such stories. Take the political group you want to vilify, Democrats, Republicans, or whatever. Say that they are in league with powerful forces, banks, pharmaceutical companies, and so on, to nefariously help themselves and harm the weak and vulnerable. When researchers made up new conspiracies using that recipe, large proportions of Americans believed them as long as the other party were the villains. We worry that if people are fooled by conspiracy theories, they will vote for the wrong candidate. But that worry gets it backward. People endorse whatever stories they can use to justify how they want to vote in the first place. Everyone is winging it. When we argue with each other over politics, we focus on issues or the recent outrages that we've heard about. But those are all just the smoke, not the fire. The truth is, we would sound pretty silly if we said truthfully that I believe my party is right and your party is wrong because I want to be a good member of the racial and other social groups that I feel closest to. So we embrace one side and reject the other, always justifying our positions based on some piece of evidence that is not really the true cause of our allegiance. We pick up those justifications or lay them down as is useful for defending our sense that we are good, reasonable people. In other words, we're all just winging it, making it up as we go along. If you want to get past these endless circles of unproductive debate, the next time you're tempted to get into a political argument, ask yourself, why do I believe what I believe? And why does my opponent believe what they believe? But don't answer with facts and evidence. You can both find plenty more where those came from. Answer how their position reassures them that they are a good, reasonable member of their groups, and how yours does the same for you. You won't start to agree with one another, but you might come to see yourselves not as mortal enemies, but as two people doing their best to make sense of the messy, complicated world the best they can.
Thank you, Keith. All right, everyone, get yourself a copy of Good Reasonable People at your favorite bookstore. And if you got something from today's show, how about giving us a rating or review in your podcast player to help others find it? And remember, if you want to have big ideas like this right in your pocket, head over to the App Store and download our Next Big Idea app. I'm Michael Kovnat. See you tomorrow.